what to include in your hourly rate. So we did a video on how to go from hourly to project-based billing, and there are a couple of things that I want you guys to consider as you establish your hourly rate. Be sure to watch that video if you haven't watched it yet in conjunction with this one. When you determine how much you want to make an hour, a lot of times this is a super common answer that I hear from people. There's somewhere between $35 and $50 is where a lot of folks start in their heads. And people that haven't been consulting full time or haven't done a lot of it, they're like, I'd really like to make that. What they don't take into consideration is you have to pay your taxes out of that. Whereas previously, if you were making $35 an hour at your full-time job, they were paying your taxes. They were doing payroll. They were paying maybe for a portion of your insurance, if not the whole thing. There was a lot of things coming out of your salary, but you were still making $35 an hour. Now, if you're making $35 to $50 an hour, you have to pay for all that stuff, which means you're really not making $35 to $50 an hour at all. One of the things that people don't consider when they're creating project-based pricing, which again, refer to the other video, is what are the items I have to pay for? Not just my time, but what are the items I have to pay for to make this service possible? If you're doing grant research, for example, maybe you have software like Foundation Directory Online or GrantStation or whatever. There's a ton of different options. Maybe you're paying for that, right? So you would want to make sure that you are charging enough for your grant research that you're covering the cost of that service for at least the time you're using it for that client, which might be just 1 month, right? Let's say you're paying $199 a month for Foundation Directory Online. You want to make sure that's incorporated unless you have 4 or 5 research clients a month, and then you want to divide that between the 4 or 5 and make sure that you're getting that cost covered, right? Let's say with that grant research product, people have to find it on your website, right? Well, who manages your website? How much do you pay for your hosting fees? Is it monthly? Is it annually? How much is your, if you're using WordPress, do you have any widgets or add-ons that you use in your shop? What is the actual cost for people to get to your website, find your shop page, register for a product, and for you to start doing the work? There's a lot of behind the scenes stuff that you want to make sure that you're getting covered in your services. If you are working with clients and you're having to go to their office, are you calculating the time that you're driving between your place and their place? Are you calculating your mileage and your gas? Are you calculating if you have to stop and eat breakfast because it's an all-day thing on the road? Or are they going to provide you with lunch? Are you taking yourself out to lunch? Do you have to get dinner on the way back? Like, do you have to spend the night at a hotel? We used to have a client in Florida that wanted us to come down once a month and have an entire day in person with them in Florida. So Marie and I would drive one day. It was an 8-hour drive, get a hotel, spend the night, have an entire VIP day with them, and then turn around and drive home very often that same night. And if not, then we had to have a second night of a hotel. So there was a lot of cost that went into that in their contract. It wasn't just we're going to spend 8 hours with you, right? It was more like 24 hours because you have 2 days of 8-hour driving, you have 8 hours on site, you have all the prep time, you have the travel costs. So as you think about what are your typical hourly rates going to be, make sure that you have an opportunity to calculate your organizational overhead, which will change from year to year. You can talk with your accountant about that. What things count in my overhead, right? So I count things like the things I'm paying for the business specifically, my subscriptions that are only for the business, the internet that I use, my phone, the percentage of my home office, mileage, any consultants or contract workers that work for the company. All these things go into overhead because if I didn't have those, I couldn't run the business, right? So those are administrative costs. And you want to make sure that you're charging enough so that you make however much you want to make an hour and you're able to cover your overhead. I remember a couple of years ago, our overhead was around 30%, which was outstanding. But then during COVID, our overhead went up to 50% because we had to do a lot more online. We had to provide and sort of beef up some services, but the revenue in some areas went down, so it made the overhead go up. You want to make sure that you are analyzing some of those things pretty regularly, either yourself or with an accountant, so you know how much am I spending just to run the business, and you want to make sure that you are making above and beyond that amount when you calculate your hourly rate. Okay, so I hope that helps as you start thinking about your hourly rates and where you want to start with them. We'll talk more about where you can start in establishing your hourly rates in an upcoming video as well.